will call this meeting to order. It is the August 23rd, 2022, regular meeting for the Finance Committee for the City of Kingsburg. We'll go to item 2, which is public comments. Any person may directly address the committee at this time. Item not on the We'll go to the phones. If there's anyone on the phone. Okay, move to item 3, the approval of the minutes.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Item 4, the 2021-22 end-year budget amendment considerations. Presentation by Finance Director Alma Collado.
Yes. The item I have tonight is the year-end budget amendments consideration for fiscal year 21-22. And as part of our review, at the end of the fiscal year, we found 117 amendments, 61 to expenditures, and 56 in revenue. We can go over some of the adjustments in brief. For the expenditures, mainly, we can start with general fund. Number 3, if you guys looking at your packet, the funding request for improvements, we decided to use our ARPA funds, and we're moving them to fiscal year 22-23. For the improvements of the building department and also the housing element update. So we're not going to use those funds, in our general fund, we're going to use our ARPA funds, and also the various departments for salaries in the general fund increased due to the COLA and the relief, the 4%, that it was faster pay. Also, and that also affected the FICA and PERS taxes. And let's see what else. If you guys look at item 15, the patrol cars for police, these cars were reallocated to fiscal year 23 because due to the delays in delivery of the patrol cars. So we will have to do a budget amendment and mid-year for fiscal year 23. The Linneas project, we had an increase of expenditures of $71,000, but those are being offset with the revenues because it's a pass-through. We get reimbursed through the Housing Authority. Also, we use some of our ARPA funds, which is item 20. And that was to provide for the seniors meals, and also the hazard pay was part of that. We did expend it. So it reflects in every line item through the salaries, and also the funds were received through the ARPA funds. So we are reflecting the expenditures made for both. And you will see under Measure E, salaries again increase, and it has to do for police and fire, and it has to do with other factors, the involvement and the wildfire assistance, and we do get reimbursed through the strike team. So it increase the expenditures, and also we get more revenue because the overtime is reimbursable. And we also got some reimbursement through police because they also assisted on a fire too.
Yeah, we got the Creek Fire.
The Creek Fire,
that came in. Obviously, they participated with for. There are some, just a couple of reductions in like the Measure E ones. So you'll see those are reflected in, they have parentheses around them, so the adjustments are actually lower, and some of that's just related to the timing of when those hires occurred. So
correct.
There were funded fully, and then if they were hired, midway through the year or something like that.
Yes, and that increase in the salaries affects the benefits, and you'll see a lot of adjustments on those. The Measure E patrol cars, same thing for police. We are reallocating it to fiscal year 23 due to the orders being delayed on those vehicles, and you will see same thing, salaries increase on the other departments, the enterprise funds, which is water, solid waste, and fire department. There's salaries and overtime increase due to the strike team, and we getting reimbursed through the Tri-County. We see an increase in their salaries and overtime, but also an increase on revenue from grants from the OES and Tri-County. IGT expense, item 54, that one, the anticipated IGT program expense was changed from fiscal year to calendar year. So what we're doing in this fiscal year is amending the expenditure and also the revenue, and we transfer funds from general fund to fire department because they're being delay. We'll get those funds in fiscal year 23. But it was from the program changing from fiscal year to calendar year, and that what else? I have a few other items that are same thing, fire department overtime and salaries, and we reflect item 58 and 59 is making the transfers to the CalPERS UAL fund for miscellaneous and safety to reflect actuals. And the revenues, we see a lot of increases in the property taxes, sales tax, Measure E, sales tax, pretty much COT, franchise, building permits. We do see, we budgeted very conservative still because of the pandemic, and that's good. We had to do that many amendments, but it's because revenues turn out better than we projected it. What else? Let's see, item 22, we received miscellaneous restitution for the fire hydrant damage and the downtown banner warranty that we recover our funds. And we did cancel the transfer from solid waste fund. We usually transfer money from that fund to general fund, and we decided not to because that solid waste fund is at a deficit.
Because we don't have the money.
And pretty much the revenues is just to reflect actuals on Measure C, Measure E. We got $200,000 more than anticipated, and pretty much impact fees that has to do with development. And water sales, we did had to do an adjustment because we got more revenues than projected, and also we did penalties in this last fiscal year, 21-22, and same thing with solid waste to reflect the penalties and IGT, the revenues being changed to calendar year affected the revenues for the ambulance and fire, and to reflect that revenue received from the hospital district grant. That's pretty much what I have. And we also receive more revenue on the Community Facilities District, the CFD.
Those states.
From Tulare County and Fresno County.
Which are based upon building permits pulled, so
Means,
it's just a timing issue that, and most of the revenues, impact fees, things collect projected for the development, we anticipated lower, because we weren't really sure what would happen with the economy, and so, because most are steady, a lot of those are reflective of that ongoing development, housing and commercial.
58, what track is that? Sawyer County.
That's the Sawyer County, that's the Summerlin one.
Item on, 42 on revenue, is that due to the new developments, Park and Rec fund?
Yeah, those,
Yes.
basically,
40,
Were developments that decided not to build a park?
from 33 to 42,
42,
all of those are development related.
One specific, the green space is 42?
Yes.
Pretty healthy fund and not just investment, but
Right,
overall.
in the full fund, you're correct.
so the recommendation, the recommended action by staff, tonight is after you review the amendment, that you recommend the necessary amendments to city council.
Y'all need a motion for that? Unless, is there any further discussion on these? Public comment? No? If not, I'll need a motion.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll send that to council. Item 5, the police fleet discussion regarding the fiscal year 23 budget.
Yeah, so, I'm gonna touch on this a little bit, but there are a couple of vehicles that, we had anticipated, being paid for last year and being delivered last year that it just doesn't look like it's gonna happen, and so, we don't usually do mid-year adjustments until January or February, but I wanted to have the conversation with the finance committee to make sure that you were comfortable with the fact that we have to move those funds, and that, there was one vehicle that will be paid for basically with insurance, but we have to make that order because there was an accident with an officer. It wasn't his fault, it wasn't their fault. The driver was uninsured. Looks like that vehicle is going to be totaled. So we have to make those orders, and the state bid is open right now, is my understanding. And so that's, I just wanted to have the conversation today so that we will be coming back with we want to make the orders, but then we will be coming back with the actual amendments, probably mid-year. So you'll see those.
So you're wanting to make the order now?
Yeah, because it's just from a timing standpoint,
Yeah.
I think we got to get on it. So, just from an actual budget amendment standpoint, we'll do those mid-year, but I wanted to have the discussion with the finance committee today.
How many vehicles are we talking about?
So it's, there's 2 that are getting carried over, and then 1 that's, the replacement that was from a crash. We actually knew that there were 3 because of the timing of those orders that we were going to carry over to this year, so we won't have to there. So we're probably going to end up, I think, in this fiscal year with 7 or 8 new vehicles, but it's really 3 vehicles outside of what we already budgeted for.
Are we ordering all 7 or 8 now?
Well, no, I think there are 4 that are on order from last year. So, and then in this year, we've got an additional 3 that are already, so there are 4 from last year that we ordered, but that we had to carry 3 of them over. There are 2 in Measure E and 1 in the general fund for this year. And then there will be 3 more that we have to add to that order.
In general fund?
1 will be general fund, 1 will be paid for by insurance, but probably will be floated by general fund. And then we have an equipment reserve fund that we use part of that, any surplus dollars, so 1 will come from that. It's just that we will actually come back with the amendments to this group, but which will probably occur.
You're just
this year.
looking for us to say it's good to go to.
Yeah, I just don't,
order
I
on
don't
how to-
want, yeah, I don't, you know, I want to be transparent. I don't want to all of a sudden for us to show up with, I don't want to show up in January and say we already ordered these vehicles, and then you go, well, we didn't authorize these vehicles, but just because of the timing of when we need to order them, and, but from a funding standpoint, they're all have funding for them.
Is that enough?
Well, don't.
Enough vehicles?
Order everything you need.
Good thing I didn't like Tuesday.
Yep. Do you need action on that, or you just need direction that we're okay with it from the
I think as long as I have direction, it's on the record, I'm okay with that, because we'll come back with actual action on that.
At mid-year.
Is there any other discussion on that?
No, I don't have any.
Is there other business?
I have two items. So one item is, obviously, the council, updated the, solid waste rates, and with that, there will be an amendment to the Mid-Valley, contract. One of the things that I want to talk a little bit about now, but we can also talk about in the future, but when we redid the contract in 2014, went out for RFP, and part of the request at that point was to have an exclusive franchise for roll-off containers as well. So roll-off containers are the large containers that you see in town. At that time, there was a large pushback on that, specifically to not franchise it, specifically because there was a local vendor who did a lot of business in town. So the council said at that point they didn't want to go. My understanding now is that local contractor is no longer doing as much business in town, and I'm hoping to get confirmation from him and perhaps a letter to the council to consider that. But also what's happened too is that a lot of the rules have changed, especially with the organics now too, whereby the reporting falls on the city. So when we have kind of an open market on these roll-offs, actually the local vendor is pretty good about it. It did work, but it's a lot of these other ones that come in from out of town. And when you go to the landfill and we don't collect those tickets, the landfill's asking where they're coming from Kingsburg, that could come back on us from a reporting and a potential fine standpoint. So, something to discuss, I guess, and I don't want, there was a lot of conversation about it 8 years ago, and so I want to make sure that we're considerate of that conversation, but also considerate of the potential impact to the city. We decide not to go with the franchise or continue to keep it open. So I will get you some additional information on that.
And then we're only talking about the roll-offs.
Yeah.
Large
Well, we have a franchise for garbage,
Right.
you know, garbage recycling and green waste. It's the roll-off containers and, kind of the changes to reporting from the state.
Right.
So there's some, there's some additional staff time to try and track those things down. A lot of the times what happens is that the contractor comes, let's just say the roofing contractor comes in. The roofing contractors are pretty good because they understand the process, but they have to put a deposit down for what we call construction debris or C&D. And it's usually $500 or more, depending upon the cost of the project, which is supposed to be an incentive for them to return with their weight tickets. And their weight tickets are what they get from the dump, which then shows that they properly disposed of them, right? Either they recycled it or they had to, and then if they come back, we give them their deposit back. That doesn't always happen. They don't always come back, which means we get to keep the money, which is fine. It's not a huge amount of money, but I mean, the bigger issue is going to become that reporting. So I thought about having Mid-Valley come in, but obviously they have a desire to have it be franchised as well, because then they get permit to use them in town. But there is a practical approach to doing that, and I'm trying to get, Daniel's working on kind of doing a little survey around the area too of what all the other communities are doing, because a lot of communities have gone to sort of a franchise thing. I think Fresno, some of the bigger ones obviously have. more than one vendor, but a lot of the smaller communities have done it. From the reporting standpoint, it's all in the valley then, right? It basically takes everything out of the city, doing everything through our franchise contractor.
Mid-Valley competitive price-wise with these other vendors?
I'd have to look into that, yeah.
I would just like to see before we franchise it, to see that they're not, because it's now monopolized.
Oh, for sure.
They're not gonna just be price gouging everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Also, what stops a private company currently from coming in, getting a $500 permit, and costing us $10,000 for the fines?
I mean, right now, it's a potential. And so that was a conversation that we had 8 years ago, right? It's like, if you keep this open, you know, it's coming at the feet of the city, which it's been okay. I think as the state has started to crack down more on where the diversion of waste is going, now you're adding organics into that potentially, it just becomes sort of another, and they're gonna increase those checks or things like that. It's just something to talk about. The second item I have is just, I'm gonna try and, hopefully get some pricing or some ideas, but, because of both the infrastructure bill and now the inflation relief bill, and I think there's gonna be a lot of money, coming down from the federal government, is we might look at, working with a grant writing service, because as much as we do, I think, a pretty good job internally of trying to go after a lot of grants, I think there's gonna be a lot available sort of, time, and I don't know that we're gonna have the capacity to go after all those, and a lot of those federal grants are, if we go after a Tri-County Healthcare District grant, it's local, it's a little bit easier for us to put together internally, and start getting these federal, and some state ones now, and there's more requirements for disadvantaged community, and basically putting together a lot of information as a part of that. I think potentially utilizing someone that's an expert in that could be advantageous for us. So I have shied away from that in the past just because of the fees that they have charged, but.
Generally percentages, right?
Well, some of them work on like a retainer, like a monthly thing, and it doesn't matter whether or not they get a successful grant or not, which has sort of been like, and because of Kingsburg's demographics, we're not always available to get some of those things, but specifically because of some of these federal, dollars that I think are gonna be, sort of, you know what I mean, like sort of, not common, it may behoove us to look at working with someone. And, there's a potential, once I have more information, that we, obviously we have some ARPA dollars too, so maybe we look at, hey, if there is a cost for utilizing them, we use some ARPA dollars to retain them, and then see what the ROI is, and if it doesn't work out after a period of time, then we, move on from that. But I have to do some more research on that, but I just kind of wanted to bring it up to this group so that it wasn't out of left field. But we're kind of waiting on more information to come down the pipe about what we actually go after. And I think, they passed the legislation and then they made the rules, so we're kind of waiting on something that I think we can go after for a lot of, our larger projects, sports complex, other things that we've been talking about.
I'd say let's try to secure that even before they roll out.
Yeah.
Just because it's kind of a rat race once it comes with the time frame. So I think you get pretty universal support with that.
Those are the only other items I have.
Other business? Okay. Well, let's turn the meeting.